Could you imagine someone being so desperate for attention that they would risk their child's life for online attention and fame? Lacey Spears seemed like the perfect example of a devoted mother. She shared every moment of her son's life, Garnett, on her blog, Garnett's Journey, from his birth in December 2008 onward. Garnett was frequently sick, and Lacey detailed his medical battles online. Her posts, filled with photos of Garnett in hospitals and hooked up to IVs, painted a picture of a single mum tirelessly fighting for her son's health. She gained a supportive following who admired her dedication. At first glance, Lacey's blog appeared to be a heartfelt journal of a mother's love and her resilience in helping her son combat his medical issues. She regularly updated her followers on Garnett's condition, sharing his struggles and small victories. Her posts expressed gratitude towards the medical professionals caring for Garnett and the community supporting her. She also posted about Garnett's father, Blake, a former policeman who was unfortunately killed in a tragic car accident. In one blog post, she recounts her story on how she told Garnett the truth on what happened to his father, a difficult conversation for a single mother to have with her child. As well as her blog posts, she would also post on social media platforms, such as Twitter, where she would frequently post updates on her son and family. Doing the work thing with Garnett Paul. It's been a rough day, but seems to be getting better. I hope. My sweet angel is in the hospital for the 23rd time. Please pray he gets to come home soon. But there were warning signs that all was not as it seemed. Garnett's medical records revealed a confusing array of symptoms and diagnoses that didn't add up. Despite extensive testing, doctors struggled to identify the cause of his ailments. Lacey often appeared more knowledgeable about Garnett's condition than the doctors, which raised some eyebrows. In retrospect, the frequent hospital visits and unexplained illnesses should have raised alarms earlier. But Lacey was convincing in her role as the concerned mother. Her blog posts were persuasive, and she used social media to gain sympathy and support from her followers. Her online presence, a mix of updates, pleas for prayers, and expressions of gratitude, helped her maintain this appearance of a genuinely concerned mother. But concerns were growing behind the scenes. Some medical professionals began to suspect that Lacey was fabricating Garnett's symptoms. They noticed inconsistencies in her accounts and the medical records. Despite numerous tests, no definitive diagnosis was ever made, which was unusual for a child with such severe and persistent health issues. These suspicions, however, weren't enough to prompt a full investigation at that time. The turning point was in January 17, 2014, when Garnett was hospitalized in New York with dangerously high sodium levels, with Lacey complaining that Garnett was suffering from seizures. He was hooked up to an EEG to record his brain activity and was monitored intensely. The first day, surprisingly, Garnett suffered from no seizures. The following 2 days after Garnett was hospitalized, the same, no seizures. The only thing the nurses were concerned about was Garnett's sodium levels. Come Sunday morning, the nurse informs Lacey that Garnett had no seizure activity over the course of the weekend and should be fine to go home. Then, just moments after the nurses and doctors leave Garnett's hospital room, like clockwork, Garnett suddenly started having seizures. Blood tests revealed he had a dangerously high sodium level at 182, when the normal range is around 140. Footage showed that once medical staff left the room, Lacey appears to take Garnett to the bathroom just outside of the camera range. Once they returned, almost immediately, Garnett would be sick again. Panic ensues as medical staff desperately try to help Garnett. Around this time, Lacey's own father arrives at the hospital. It is at this point when it's discovered that Blake, the father of Garnett and deceased husband of Lacey, isn't actually dead. And he isn't Garnett's father. Lacey had been using photos of Blake Robinson, a Morgan County Sheriff's deputy, to pose as her deceased husband, with Robinson having no idea this was happening. Garnett Spears was airlifted to Westchester's Maria Ferreri Children's Hospital. Dr. Sarika Sunku, who treated Garnett, would later testify that throughout this whole ordeal, Lacey was oddly quite calm as they waited for the helicopter to transport him, initially not even wanting to accompany him on the ride. She claimed Spears wanted to ride with a friend and she would meet them over there. She would then later change her mind and would board the helicopter. Garnett's condition improved, but the high levels of sodium in his system had already caused his brain to swell. He was placed on life support, and on the 23rd of January 2014, he was officially declared dead. Doctors suspected Lacey had poisoned her son due to their inability to come up with a medical explanation with Garnett's issues. From here, the police obtained a search warrant for Lacey's apartment. Within her apartment, police seized hundreds of items, including a bottle of sea salt seen in this photo. They also receive a shocking phone call from Lacey's neighbour, Valerie Plosh. She informed police that Lacey called her to ask her to go to her apartment, retrieve the feeding bag, and dispose of it without telling anyone. The police would then recover the feeding bag, which was submitted to the Westchester County lab for analysis. Lab reports revealed that the feeding bags contained massive amounts of sodium, with each bag containing the equivalent of 69 small packets of salt. One thing was now clear. Lacey Spears was deliberately poisoning her son with high levels of sodium. This revelation was shocking and devastating. How could a mother harm her own child, especially one she seemed to love so much? As the investigation continued, it became clear that Lacey suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver causes illness in someone under their care to gain attention and sympathy. The evidence against Lacey was overwhelming. Police found text messages and internet searches on her phone about the effects of sodium poisoning and how to administer it. Her blog posts and social media updates were reviewed, revealing a disturbing pattern of behaviour consistent with Munchausen by proxy. The public was horrified as the true nature of Garnett's journey was exposed. During the trial, prosecutors painted a grim picture of Lacey's actions. They described how she manipulated and deceived everyone around her, using Garnett's illness to gain sympathy and financial support. The prosecution presented evidence showing that Garnett's sodium levels spiked only when he was alone with Lacey. Witnesses testified about Lacey's obsessive need for attention and her willingness to exploit her son's suffering to get it. The defense tried to argue that Lacey was a caring mother, overwhelmed by Garnett's medical issues. They claimed that any inconsistencies in her behaviour were due to stress and fatigue. However, the evidence was too strong. On April 8, 2015, the jury found Lacey Spears guilty of second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter in Garnett's death. She was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison for the death of her son. The public reaction was one of shock and disbelief. Many who had followed Garnett's journey felt betrayed and horrified that they had unknowingly supported such a sinister narrative. The case sparked widespread discussions about Munchausen syndrome by proxy and the ethical implications of sharing personal medical stories online. Garnett's journal, the blog posted ran by Lacey, as well as her other social media profiles, are still up to this day. It's incredibly eerie reading through her posts and updates as she documents her apparent struggles with Garnett, when in reality, it was she that was causing so much suffering and pain to Garnett. In the end, her desperation for attention cost the life of her own child, with her blog posts and social media profiles acting as a reminder that not everything is as it seems. On March 22, 1998, a disturbing email was sent out to the Moderation Management Network, an online support group for alcoholics to support one another. The harrowing words, "I murdered because her mother stood between us," begun a haunting confession of a man's horrifying actions. But the question remains, What would cause someone to publicly confess to such a horrible crime? 5-year-old Amanda Froistad, daughter of Larry Froistad and Ann Purdy, begun showing aggressive behavior in mid-1994 at her local daycare. Amanda's mother, Ann, took her to a counselor to find out why Amanda was behaving in such a way. This is where Amanda confessed something horrific. She was being abused by her father. The counselor, as required by law, reported the abuse to South Dakota's Child Welfare Agency. As the counselor was in South Dakota, and the abuse was occurring in another state, North Dakota, the authorities did not appropriately address the report. Larry wasn't punished for his actions, and to make it worse, he wasn't denied access to his daughter despite Amanda's claims. Larry was essentially a free man, but this burden must have eaten away at his conscience. In 1995, some months after Amanda's claims, Larry got incredibly drunk and set his house on fire while 5-year-old Amanda was trapped inside. He then climbed outside of the window, leaving her inside. She could be heard screaming, but her voice would eventually slowly fade. Minutes would pass until Larry entered the house again, picked up Amanda, and realized she was still alive. With this knowledge, he once again climbed back out of the window, leaving Amanda in the burning house. He then called the police, pretending to be upset over the death of his daughter. He informed the police that his daughter's dying screams had awakened him and allowed him to escape the fire, later writing, "Those last 2 screams that I tell everyone saved my life. They are wounds on my soul that I can't heal and that I'm sure I'm meant to carry with me." Even though the entire ordeal seemed unusual, Larry was never prosecuted, with the reason being all of the local police had known Larry and his family well. They just couldn't believe he would do such a thing, even though some elements of the fire made no sense. So, after abusing his daughter, and later on setting his house on fire, which ended up in Amanda's life being taken away, Larry was a free man. This would continue until 1998, 4 years after Amanda had reported the abuse, and 3 years after Larry setting his house on fire, when Larry would submit his email to the Moderation Management Network. During that weekend, Larry posted that his girlfriend had left him and that he was drinking too much. When the email chain replied to him, assuring him that he would get over it, Larry responded that they didn't know the person he truly was. From here is when his confession began. His confession was divided into 3 separate posts, and as you read through each one, it gets increasingly clear he isn't joking. In his first post he wrote, "My God, there's something I haven't mentioned, but it's a very important part of the equation. The people I'm mourning the loss of, I've ejected from my life. Amanda, I murdered because her mother stood between us." His second post continues, "Okay, it seems to me that there's a great deal of risk to this. My email can be traced. I've been wide open about my identity. But somehow, I've unintentionally left the impression that I'm flailing myself for some sort of weird self-gratification. Maybe I do that to some extent. But when I talk about killing my daughter, there's no imaginative subcomponent. The conflict was tearing me apart. I suffered for years trying to get custody of her after her mother divorced me. When I did, I still had to deal with her mother's constant attempts to take her back. I had the upper hand. In fact, her mother gave up her summer custody just before I killed Amanda. But I always felt that I was not in complete control. My mother told me that I was too hard on her, that I expected too much from her. When I brought her home from her mother's, I abandoned the rules I had set and let her do whatever she wanted. In fact, my mother and grandmother visited the next day, and she forgot that she was supposed to get dressed before receiving visitors. It really was very cute when she woke up and started to walk into our living room, buck naked. I loved her for her willingness to be fun in simple ways. I would do anything to have her back. But the conflict was tearing me apart, and the next night, I let her watch the videos she loved all evening. And when she was asleep, I got wickedly drunk, set our house on fire, went to bed, listened to her scream twice, climbed out the window and set about putting on a show of shock, surprise and grief to remove culpability from myself. Damn it, part of that show was climbing in her window and grabbing her pajamas, then hearing her breathe and dropping her where she was so she could die and rid me of her mother's interferences. Hearing her wheeze in the smoke which I could barely stand, looking at her bedroom door burning, these are things I can't forget. Those last 2 screams that I tell everyone saved my life. They are wounds on my soul that I can't heal and that I'm sure I'm meant to carry with me. I am damaged goods, and as much as I feel I need the comfort of someone in my life that I can be good to, someone I can build a new family with, the simple fact is that I don't deserve those things, and I'm meant to suffer 1,000 times longer than my little girl did. I cried like a baby in the emergency room at the hospital. I was very disappointed that I couldn't see her after they pulled her out of our house, where they took her before they carted me off. I was stunned and shocked the whole time they flew me down to Rapid City for observation and such, and I've been destroyed ever since. He concludes with one final post, writing, "I'm sorry to everyone I hurt by my post. I certainly don't want to drive anyone away from the list, but I was hurting and continue to, and it's a big part of why I drink as much as I do." Within this email support group was Elisa DiCarlo, who also used the community to share her struggles about her battle against alcohol. While some members of the group were appalled by Larry's confession, some supported him, saying that the crime was long past. One woman who barely knew Larry forwarded a personal email he had written to her at the same time he had confessed, saying, "Honey, I can make a difference for you if you give me a chance. I would love to try being close to you." Within this group of over 200 members, all of whom received this chilling confession from Larry, only 3 of them, including Elisa DiCarlo, reported the email confession to the police. Larry would later call the police on March 27th to confess to setting the house on fire and was later arrested that same day. According to court documents, investigators who seized Larry's computer found inappropriate imagery of children. They also found at least 2 online messages in which he confessed to abusing his daughter. Judge Maurice Hunker of Southwest District Court told Larry, "Living creatures protect their young. You chose to cause the death of the most vulnerable victim there could be. A child. Your child." In a plea deal, Larry pleaded guilty to both murder and child molestation. He was sentenced to 30 years of prison time, eligible for parole this year, in 2024. This story is such an awful tragedy, costing the life of an innocent 5-year-old child because of one man's sick and twisted actions. The lack of accountability is so shocking when you consider that he was never originally charged for abusing his daughter following her confession, nor was he ever charged for the burning of his home, even though there were multiple inconsistencies. It was only when Larry confessed to his crimes that justice was served. Even creepier is when he describes his daughter running around buck naked. The innocence of it all is completely destroyed when you remember that he had abused her and had discussed this online with other disgusting child abusers. Although he was eligible for parole in 2024, I did find a parole board dated on August 2022 from the North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. From my understanding, he applied for parole in 2022, but was denied. What really gets to me about this story is how he essentially would have gotten away had he not confessed. There are countless stories every day worldwide about tragic deaths, kidnappings with the attackers more often than not being apprehended. But stories like these really make you wonder about all the times the attacks are never reported, with the attackers freely roaming around, potentially waiting to strike again. Imagine you're scrolling through Facebook one day when you see one of your friends post a new update, confessing that they've just taken the life of someone. What would you do? These were the words written by Anthony McNeil which he shared with his 216 Facebook friends on August 28, 2016. The whole ordeal began when police received a call about a domestic dispute between Anthony and his ex-girlfriend Cindy, who had only recently had a restraining order out against him only a couple of days prior to this incident. The situation escalated between the two, where Anthony would take the life of Cindy's father, Eugene Racine, then flee the scene, later posting the update, "Just killed someone, leaving North Carolina. Goodbye, everyone." You can imagine the original disbelief or shock his friends must have initially felt, but Anthony kept posting updates as he tried to flee the state. "I'm not turning myself in. If I can't make it out of North Carolina, I'm going to shoot myself." He posted another update, writing, "Kinda always knew I wouldn't live to be 35. If I can't get away, I'm going to take myself out." He even went on to share a local news story about his crimes on Facebook, almost as if the whole ordeal was just one funny joke to him. Several friends urged Anthony to turn himself in and do the right thing. "Please, don't do anything more. Don't leave your family with any more hurt. Turn yourself in. Let your girl know you're at least man enough to own your mistakes." Another friend wrote, "Anthony, I don't know what direction your life has turned over the past few years, but I do know that you now have a daughter, and I've seen the way you look at each other. She's going to grow up, man. Think about the story she's going to have. My dad made a mistake, and now he's paying for it, like a man. Or, my dad took his own life when I was a baby. Come on, man. Don't do this. And don't listen to these stupid, ignorant people that are using this as a marketing ploy to gain publicity. You know what you need to do." Despite all this, he didn't really seem to care. In his final post on August 28th at 10:20 a.m., he wrote, "Goodbye to my friends and people who gave a damn. Cindy Racine, you might not believe in God, but I think whoever is in charge spared your life today." Cindy's sister would post screenshots of their conversation to Facebook shortly after he had taken her father's life. Cindy had the chance to stop this. She thought I was joking. She knew. "Why take my father's life? Over Cindy? Are you serious? Do you know how stupid that is? That was my father. You took my child's grandfather away. You took my father away. I wanted to take Cindy's too. Are you effing serious? My dad? What did he have to do with it? He has been a dick to me since day one. He helped drive a wedge between Cindy and I. You weren't good. Look, you could have found somebody else. Now look, you took my father's life and now you're being looked for. Is this what you wanted? To bring despair to my family? To hurt my entire family because Cindy didn't want to be with you? No, I didn't care about that. I wanted to get back at her because she never told you how she ran her mouth and thought I couldn't do a thing. I did it to prove to her. Anthony, that was a father, a son, a brother. Of course, nobody wants to believe somebody would be capable of such a thing. Why couldn't you just leave each other alone? Now I have no parents because you couldn't leave her alone." Weirdly enough, some people seemed to just support Anthony and his decisions. "I swear I'll miss you so effing much," whereas others fully blamed Cindy for everything that ended up happening. "You know, I have known Anthony all my life since we were kids. To tell you the truth, for him to do something like this, he had to have been pushed hard and to the limit. Is it right? No, it's not. It was a bad choice, and he knows that more than likely. I just wish I knew what it was that brought him to this point. As well as that, he will start to make the right decisions. Miss you, bro, no matter what." One other person replied, saying, "His ex-girlfriend is what got him here. She was pure poison. She got to him. I don't understand how, but she did. I wish he listened to us when we told him to stay away from her." Days would go by with Anthony still on the run from police. It wouldn't be until August 31st, 3 days after Anthony's initial Facebook post, that the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office reported that a body had been found. which was indeed identified as Anthony McNeil. The body was found just a few blocks away from where he had taken the life of Eugene. In the end, Anthony got his wish, as he said he refused to be taken alive. We unfortunately don't know the full story, but given there was a restraining order placed on him, it was clear their relationship was rocky. Regardless of his ongoing issues with his ex-girlfriend Cindy, his decision to take Eugene's life and confessing to Cindy's sister to having wanted to take Cindy's life too is just mental. His reasoning was because she was running her mouth, and he wanted to prove that he could do it. It's just so incredibly immature and reckless. What did he gain from doing that? Nothing. He took himself out and left a broken family to pick up the pieces, but not before gloating about it on Facebook, even going so far as to share a local news report about his manhunt, as if it's just one big game for him. I've not been able to find any further information or update on the family, but I hope they've been able to move on from this tragedy.